Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're attempting something, well, truly ambitious, I think.
Yeah, definitely ambitious. We've pulled together a reading list that kind of defies easy categorization.
Totally. We're jumping from ancient Rome with Cicero to the spiritual wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita.
Cross to, the hard-nosed military strategy of Sun Tzu.
And then, boom, right into the modern day. We're talking Pixar, IBM, Ray Dalio's Bridgewater. It's a lot.
It really is an incredible collection. But the goal here, the mission for this deep dive, isn't just to, give you a book report on each one.
Right, we're looking for something deeper.
We're hunting for those universal rules, those sort of perennial truths about what makes individuals and organizations, well, effective,
Yeah.
enduringly effective.
Exactly. What actually works, not just in theory, but in practice, and not just in business, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about effectiveness in life, in leadership, across the board.
Yeah, the why and the how of success. We're trying to distill it all down into maybe 3 core areas for today.
Okay, so what are those pillars? Well, first, we absolutely have to start with the foundation. Character, internal principles, that inner map makes sense. Where it all begins, what's second?
Second, we need to look at the culture that enables effective action, specifically this idea of radical truth or candor. How do you build an environment where truth surfaces?
Okay, inner foundation, then outer culture of truth. And third,
And third, strategic action itself. How do you actually navigate conflict, make decisions, and ensure things get done with? Let's call it strategic agility, the ability to adapt and recover.
character, candor, agility, got it. So we're trying to cut through all the noise, basically.
Precisely. To find that timeless logic that connects, say, a Roman statesman, an ancient warrior philosopher, and a modern animation director.
It sounds a bit crazy when you put it like that.
It does, but hopefully by the end, you'll have a sort of powerful shortcut to understanding the why and how behind lasting effectiveness. All right, let's dive into that first pillar, the inner map. It's so easy to get caught up in the external stuff.
Oh, absolutely. We celebrate the big titles, the visible achievements, the scale of operations, the
Yeah.
CEO, the president, the huge factory floor.
Yeah, the stuff you can point to. But Ralph Waldo Emerson, he really flips that script, doesn't he? He talks about where real action actually happens.
He does. He calls it the power of internal revisal. And it's profound, really. Emerson points out that the most significant actions often occur in these, quote, silent moments.
Silent moments, like just thinking.
Exactly. A thought crystallizes, an insight lands, and suddenly it revises our entire manner of life. It sets a whole new direction, but we miss it
Why do we miss it?
because of what he calls the superstitions of sense. We're kind of blinded by size, by magnitude. We see the poet quietly writing and think, oh, they're inactive just because they aren't, running a Fortune 500 company. Right. We undervalue the internal shift because it's invisible.
But that moment of internal correction, that decision to change a core belief or direction, Emerson argues that's the most powerful action you can take. It's the source code for everything else.
Okay, so that internal course correction happens first. Then what? How do we navigate once we've decided to change the map?
Well, that's where the classical thinkers, like Cicero, come in. In his work De Officiis on Duties, he lays out a kind of framework for what good action, aligned with that inner map, actually looks like.
He's defining what's right with a capital R, like our obligations.
Pretty much. He outlines 4 core virtues that he argues are essential for any action to be truly good, truly human.
Okay, what are they?
First, prudence, which is basically wisdom, the pursuit of truth. Second, justice, and this is key. He includes benevolence and justice, acting for the good of others, not just avoiding harm.
Okay, wisdom and justice, including kindness. Got it.
Third is fortitude, or magnanimity, strength of character, resilience. And fourth is order, which covers temperance, moderation, knowing the right measure.
Prudence, justice, fortitude, order. Okay. But how does that feel practical? Those sound a bit abstract.
Well, Cicero connects them back to something almost aesthetic. He argues that truly good action should satisfy an innate sense of harmony, proportion, timing, measure. If an action feels out of whack, discordant, or excessive, it's probably violating one of those core virtues.
Huh. So there's like an inner compass that tells you if you're aligned with these virtues, a sense of rightness almost.
Exactly, a kind of ethical and aesthetic judgment rolled into one. And that pursuit of internal harmony, that stability, It leads us directly into Eastern thought, particularly the Bhagavad Gita.
Right, because the Gita talks a lot about what disrupts that inner harmony, doesn't it? Specifically, attachment.
Precisely.
Mm.
The Gita identifies attachment and aversion, liking and disliking things based on sensory experience as the fundamental stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. They destabilize the mind.
So, for a leader or anyone trying to act effectively, how does that play out? The instruction is pretty clear. Focus intensely on the work itself. Do the task. Shiram kevala karma, with skill, with dedication. Put everything into the action. However, there's always a however.
You must perform that action while remaining nirashar, renouncing the fruits, the results of the action.
Okay, hold on. Renounce the fruits. How is that practical? If I'm running a project, launching a product, I live by the results. My bonus depends on the fruits. Isn't detaching from the outcome just apathy? Giving up? That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And the Gita anticipates it. It's not about apathy at all. It's about psychological freedom. Think about it. If you're completely attached to the outcome, and like when the result is bad, you're crushed. You suffer intensely, aversion kicks in. When the result is good, you're maybe elated, but also anxious. How do I keep this up? Attachment takes over.
Okay, I see that cycle. Win or lose, you're kind of jerked around emotionally. Exactly. And in both states, your ability to perform the next action with clarity and skill is compromised. Your mind isn't stable. By renouncing the fruits, meaning detaching your ego, your self-worth, from whether you win or lose, you avoid getting trapped in those binding reactions, what the Gita calls kilbhyam.
So the goal isn't don't care, it's don't let the outcome destabilize your ability to act.
Perfectly put. The aim is samyak equanimity, a balanced mind capable of clear, skillful action regardless of what happened last time or what might happen next time. Execute with 100% commitment to the action and the principles, but release the ego's grip on the result.
That makes a lot more sense. It's about maintaining readiness for the next challenge. Okay, so this focus on principle, on inner stability, it sets up a direct clash with the idea of expediency, doesn't it? The ends justify the means argument.
It really does. And Cicero tackles this head-on, providing a strong counterpoint to thinkers like Machiavelli, who often get interpreted, maybe unfairly sometimes, as promoting pure pragmatism.
So what's Cicero's warning?
He insists that what seems expedient, what looks like a clever shortcut to a desired outcome, must not be morally wrong. If achieving your goal requires abandoning truth, honesty, justice, then the price is too high.
Why? What's the price? Your character, your humanity. Cicero asks this absolutely chilling question. If you achieve your ends by betraying your principles, what difference does it make if you turn yourself from a man into a beast? Wow. So violating those core virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, order, even for a seemingly good reason, actually degrades you.
That's his argument. It reduces the actor to a more primitive, less human state, governed by base impulses rather than reason and virtue.
Okay, but let's bring in Machiavelli here. Wouldn't he argue that sometimes, especially in politics or crisis, you need that beastly severity, that sometimes a leader has to get their hands dirty for the greater good, for stability?
And that's exactly where the infamous example of Caesar Borgia comes into play. It's a masterclass in ruthless expediency.
Right. Borgia needed to unify the Romagna region, which was apparently a total mess, chaotic, rebellious.
Completely fractured. So Borgia needed order, and he needed it fast. What does he do? Machiavelli tells us he appoints this guy, Messer Romero d'Orco, described as a swift and cruel man.
Swift and cruel doesn't sound good.
D'Orco goes in and brutally cracks down, restores peace, imposes unity, achieves Borgia's immediate objective through sheer force and, frankly, terror. The expedient action worked, in a sense.
But then what? D'Orco must have been incredibly unpopular after that.
Universally hated. And Borgia, ever the calculator, realizes this hatred is now sticking to him. It's become a political liability.
So what's the next expedient move?
The ultimate Machiavellian twist. To distance himself from the cruelty he ordered, Borgia has D'Orco publicly arrested and executed, leaves his body cut in two in the town square with a wooden block and a bloody knife beside it.
Jeez. That's harsh, incredibly harsh, but politically brilliant in a terrifying way. Machiavelli says the effect was perfect. The people were at once satisfied. The source of their immediate suffering was gone, and dismayed, they saw the raw, terrifying power of Borgia, who could eliminate even his own instruments. So Borgia got the benefit of the severity, but deflected the blame onto D'Orco.
Exactly. He used cruelty as a tool, then disposed of the tool to appear just, or at least decisive. It's the pinnacle of separating the leader from the necessary but unpopular actions required for power consolidation.
But you have to ask, what's the long-term cost of that kind of leadership? Cicero would argue Borgia became the beast, right?
Absolutely. While it might work for short-term political gain, it builds a foundation of fear, erodes trust, and likely necessitates more calculated violence down the line to maintain control. It's a cycle that, history shows, eventually consumed Borgia himself. So we have this stark contrast, stability built on character versus stability built on fear and expediency, that difference in approach, that underlying belief system. It perfectly sets up Stephen Covey's point about perception, doesn't it? It really does. Covey's core insight here is that all the effort, all the skill, all the hard work in the world is essentially useless if your underlying perception, your paradigm, your map is wrong.
Right, the famous map analogy.
It's just brilliant because it's so simple and true. Your paradigm, your belief system, your assumptions, that's your mental map of the world. But as Covey constantly reminds us, the map is not the territory.
And if the map is wrong?
If you have a map of Chicago, but someone accidentally labeled it Detroit, that map isn't just unhelpful, it's actively harmful. You could have the best attitude, work incredibly hard, double your speed navigating.
And you'll just get to the wrong place faster, maybe even feeling good about making such great progress.
Exactly. You'll be efficiently, happily lost. The solution in that case isn't behavioral. It's not about trying harder or having a better attitude about being in Chicago.
It's about realizing you're not in Detroit.
It requires a fundamental paradigm shift. You have to change the map itself. You need to correct your perception to accurately reflect reality. Only then does the effort become productive.
And Covey ties this internal shift, this corrected map, directly to proactive behavior, right? He talks about specific qualities needed.
Yes, he emphasizes resourcefulness and initiative, often shortened to R&I. These are critical for proactive people.
Okay, break those down. Resourcefulness and initiative.
Resourcefulness is the ability to figure things out, to find solutions, to see pathways forward, even when things are ambiguous or difficult. It's the how-to capability. Initiative is the drive to act on that resourcefulness, to do something about it without waiting to be told, without waiting for perfect conditions.
So it's seeing the way and then taking the first step.
Precisely. It's the practical application of that corrected internal map. Proactive people don't wait for the world to be perfect. They use their R&I to navigate the world as it is, taking responsibility for making things happen. It's the bridge from Emerson's silent moment of revisal to actual effective action in the world.
Okay, so we've established the importance of getting that inner map right. Principles, stability, accurate perception. But then inevitably we have to interact with other people. And that's where things get complicated.
Deeply complicated,
Right.
because effective action almost always involves collaboration, and collaboration requires communication. Which brings us to the challenge of truth-telling.
Right.
And the book Crucial Conversations has a great term for the trap we fall into here, the fool's choice.
Ah, yes, the fool's choice. It's that very common, very false dilemma we create for ourselves.
Which is?
Okay, I can either tell this person the hard truth and risk damaging the relationship, maybe make them defensive or angry, or I can keep the peace, preserve the relationship, but I have to bite my tongue, be dishonest, or just stay silent about what really needs to be said. Truth versus relationship. We feel like we have to pick one.
Exactly. But the authors argue that skilled communicators completely reject that choice. They refuse to choose. They aim for both 100% honesty and 100% respect. They work to create dialogue, a state where meaning can flow freely, even when the topic is incredibly difficult or uncomfortable.
And that ties directly into Kim Scott's work on radical candor, doesn't it? Her framework is all about finding that sweet spot. It really is. Scott defines radical candor as the intersection of two axes, caring personally on one axis and challenging directly on the other. You need both to be radically candid. Okay, challenging directly seems straightforward enough, telling the truth, being blunt when necessary. But caring personally, what does that actually mean in a work context? Do I have to be best friends with everyone?
That's a really important clarification Scott makes. Caring personally doesn't mean you have to agree on everything outside of work, or even like someone in a traditional friend sense.
So I don't need to share their politics or hobbies.
Not at all. Scott explicitly says it's possible and actually essential to care personally about a colleague, even if you hold fundamentally different worldviews on really sensitive things, like, politics, religion, social issues, whatever.
So where does the caring connection come from then?
Their shared work. The common purpose, the collaborative effort, the dedication to the project, or the mission that's the bond. That's where the care manifests professionally. Insisting on total personal alignment before you can build trust and challenge directly is a recipe for, well, Disaster.
Yeah, you'd end up with groupthink, artificial harmony.
Exactly. Mediocrity. Radical candor starts with basic human respect and decency, and then builds the professional bond through shared commitment to the work itself.
That idea of institutionalizing candid, fearless feedback. You can't talk about that without bringing up Pixar and the brain trust.
Oh, the brain trust is probably one of the most studied and, frankly, effective models for embedding candor into a creative process. They figured out how to make criticism constructive, how to make it fuel, not friction.
So how does it work? What makes it different from just any old feedback session?
There are two really critical differences based on what Ed Catmull writes about it. First, who is in the brain trust?
Okay.
It's composed exclusively of peers, fellow directors, lead writers, heads of story, people who have been in the trenches, who deeply understand the craft of storytelling at a high level. This isn't random executives giving notes, it's practitioners giving expert feedback.
So the feedback is informed, credible, makes sense. What's the second rule? This is the one that often blows people's minds. The brain trust has zero authority. Wait, zero. They can't tell the director what to fix.
Nope. They offer their candid assessments, they point out problems, they share their reactions, but they cannot mandate any solutions. The director of the film retains 100% creative ownership and control.
Okay, that seems counterintuitive. Why give feedback if it can just be ignored? Doesn't that undermine the candor if there are no teeth? You'd think so, but Catmull argues it's absolutely essential for preserving candor and, crucially, creative ownership. Think about it. If the brain trust could force changes, yeah.
They might be solving the symptom, not the root cause. A story problem might manifest in Act 3, but the real issue might be way back in the character setup in Act 1. If the director is forced to implement the brain trust's Act 3 fix, they haven't really solved the underlying problem, and they've lost ownership of the solution.
Okay. Because they retain ownership, they have to truly understand the feedback, wrestle with it, and find the real fix themselves, which might be something totally different than what the brain trust suggested.
Precisely. They have to internalize the critique and dig deeper. It forces a more fundamental engagement with the problems.
And this structure, it really puts candor above hierarchy, doesn't it? I'm thinking of the Steve Jobs story.
The classic example, Steve Jobs, obviously Pixar's owner, CEO, a huge personality, massive source of power within the company.
Yeah, his presence would change the dynamic in any room.
Totally. And Ed Catmull talks about how he and Jobs mutually agreed that Steve would not attend brain trust meetings.
Even though he owned the company and was deeply invested.
Because they both recognized that his bigger-than-life presence, as Catmull put it, would inevitably stifle candor. People would hesitate, they'd defer, they wouldn't speak as freely. The need for unvarnished truth to make the film great had to trump even the owner's desire to be in the room.
That's incredible. It really underlines the goal isn't about winning an argument or pleasing the boss.
Right. The stated goal is to excavate the truth. Find what's not working, why it's not working, and get that truth out on the table so the director can use it.
And sometimes that truth isn't just technical, it's deeply emotional, like the Wall-E example.
Yeah, that's a perfect illustration. Andrew Stanton, the director, had an ending where Wall-E saves Eve.
Makes logical sense, maybe.
Sure, the hero saves the day.
But Brad Bird, another director in the Brain Trust, watched it and gave a crucial note. He basically said, Andrew, the audience isn't waiting for Wall-E to save Eve. They're waiting for Eve to finally break her programming, her directive, and go all out to save Wall-E.
Because her transformation is the emotional core the audience is invested in by that point. Exactly. It wasn't a note about plot mechanics. It was about emotional truth. What does the audience need to feel at that moment? Stanton heard that, realized Bird was right, and it led to that incredibly moving, resonant ending where Eve chooses Wall-E over her mission. Candor unlocked the heart of the story. It's such a powerful model. Now, shifting gears slightly, Ray Dalio at Bridgewater Associates has a similar focus on truth, but with his own twist, the idea meritocracy.
Right.
Dalio is also obsessed with getting the best ideas to win out, regardless of hierarchy, through radical truth and transparency, but he adds a layer of pragmatism.
How so?
He argues that for an idea meritocracy to actually work in a fast-paced environment like finance, it can't just be a free-for-all where everyone's opinion carries equal weight on every topic. That would lead to chaos and paralysis.
Okay, so how do you avoid that?
You need to factor in believability. Dalio's system involves assessing how believable each person's opinion is on a specific topic, based primarily on their demonstrated track record and experience in that domain.
So it's not just the idea, but also the credibility of the person proposing it, a kind of hierarchy of merit.
Exactly. It's still merit-based, but the merit includes the person's proven ability in that area. It's designed to weigh credible opinions more heavily, allowing the organization to move faster than if every single point had to be debated endlessly by everyone.
Okay. I can see the efficiency argument. But doesn't that risk shutting down newer people or unconventional ideas from less believable sources? Isn't it just reinforcing existing power structures?
That's the critical risk. And Dalio acknowledges it. He says it only works if it's paired with extreme humility and specific protocols.
Like what?
Like, if you're deemed less believable on a topic, your responsibility shifts. You're expected to approach the discussion more as a student, genuinely trying to understand the perspective of the more believable person rather than just stubbornly pushing your own view.
Okay, so adopt a learning stance if you lack the track record. What about the highly believable person?
Their responsibility is to remain open-minded, to recognize they could be wrong, and crucially, to take the time to explain their reasoning clearly until others understand the why behind the decision. It's not just, trust me, I'm believable.
Got it. And Dalio also warns against getting bogged down in minor exceptions, right?
Yes, that's a key point for maintaining momentum. If a general principle or strategic direction is, by and large, true, say, our industry is shifting towards renewable energy, you shouldn't derail the entire strategic discussion by constantly bringing up tiny counterexamples like one small fossil fuel company that had a good quarter. Focus on the big picture trend, acknowledge exceptions exist, but don't let them paralyze decision-making.
So whether it's Pixar's brain trust or Dalio's meritocracy, the underlying theme is structured, respectful, but ultimately ruthless pursuit of the truth, grounded in the work itself to enable better execution.
That's the core idea. Aligning the organization around reality, however uncomfortable, is the prerequisite for effective collective action.
All right, so we've got our inner principles sorted, and we've built a culture that embraces truth. Now let's talk about actually acting in the world, especially when faced with competition or conflict. And who better to start with than Sun Tzu?
Indeed. Sun Tzu's Art of War offers timeless insights into strategy. One of his most fundamental maxims is about defense, about security.
What's the core idea?
He advises that the skilled commander, the good fighter, first puts themselves beyond the possibility of defeat.
Beyond the possibility of defeat, that sounds ambitious. How?
It's about securing your own position before seeking victory. Conceal your strengths and weaknesses, your disposition. Protect your supply lines and vital assets. Ensure you have the necessary resources. Cover your tracks so the enemy doesn't know your plans. Basically, make yourself invulnerable first.
So defense first, offense second.
Essentially, yes. Only after you've secured your own position do you wait for the enemy to make a mistake, to reveal a vulnerability, to provide the opportunity for you to defeat them. Don't attack recklessly. Attack when the conditions are right because you are secure and they are exposed.
Okay, translate that to, say, the business world. What does that look like?
It means maybe your first strategic priority isn't launching some risky, flashy new product. Maybe it's securing your intellectual property, building up a strong cash reserve, consolidating a defensible niche in the market where you cannot be easily dislodged.
Build the fortress before you sally forth.
Something like that. Security enables bold action later. It's the foundation.
And when the time for action comes, speed and maneuverability are often key, right? Clausewitz talks about this.
Yeah. Carl von Clausewitz, writing much later, particularly noted the effectiveness of speed in what he called small war, essentially guerrilla warfare or asymmetrical conflicts. He highlighted how forces like cavalry, because of their speed, could bypass the enemy's main strength, hit weak points, disrupt logistics, and avoid decisive battles they couldn't win.
So nimbleness beats brute force in certain situations.
Absolutely. It's the organizational equivalent of being agile. Small, autonomous teams or units that can move quickly and adapt locally can often achieve strategic effects that large, slow-moving corporate bureaucracies just can't match.
This idea of different types of forces and how you command them, it brings us back to something more fundamental about leadership style. Aristotle made a key distinction here.
He did. Aristotle differentiated between various forms of rule, and it's incredibly relevant to modern leadership. He contrasted political rule, the rule of a statesman over free citizens, with other forms like monarchical rule or a master's rule over slaves.
What's the core difference?
Political rule, the kind appropriate for governing a state or leading citizens, is rule over people who are naturally free and operate under law, and ideally some form of consent. This requires leadership through persuasion, appealing to reason, explaining principles, building consensus.
So leading peers or knowledge workers, perhaps.
Exactly. It's fundamentally different from how a master rules a slave. or how a monarch might rule a household in ancient times, which is based on dictate, direct command, and control, assuming the subordinates lack agency or rights.
So, trying to lead highly skilled, autonomous employees like a master command slaves is probably not going to work well.
It's destined to fail in the long run. Effective leadership in most modern organizations requires treating people like free citizens, respecting their intelligence, explaining the why, and engaging them based on shared principles and vision, not just command and control.
But sometimes leaders do need to enforce difficult decisions, maybe even use a degree of severity. How does that square with leading free people? Let's loop back to Borgia and Dorco.
Ah, yes. Borgia's solution was, well, Machiavellian. He needed the severe action, the crackdown by Dorco, to achieve stability. But he also recognized that personally embodying that cruelty would alienate the populace he needed to rule.
So he used Dorco as an instrument, a sort of bad cop.
Precisely. He delegated the dirty work. Dorco takes the heat, restores order through fear, and then Borgia, by executing Dorco, performs a public act that satisfies the people's desire for retribution while simultaneously demonstrating his own ultimate power and separating himself from the direct blame for the initial cruelty.
It's a chillingly effective piece of political theater, however morally questionable.
Yeah.
What's the leadership lesson there besides be ruthless?
I think the less cynical lesson is about understanding the impact of necessary but unpopular actions. Sometimes, for the health of the whole organization, tough decisions or enforcement actions are required. The leader has to own the decision, ultimately, but how it's implemented and communicated, and who acts as the direct instrument, needs careful consideration to avoid fatally wounding the leader's own legitimacy or relationship with the broader group.
So manage the fallout, protect the core leadership legitimacy if possible, even when doing hard things. We see the negative consequences when this kind of clear, principled execution breaks down, like at IBM before Lou Gerstner arrived.
Oh, absolutely. Gerstner's turnaround of IBM is legendary. When he took over, he found a company drowning in its own internal processes and politics.
What was the core problem he identified?
He observed this incredibly destructive cultural habit he called pushback. Basically, people felt empowered, even obligated, to constantly fight and relitigate decisions that had already been made, sometimes years earlier.
Wow, so endless internal debate instead of external action.
Exactly. The culture tolerated, even encouraged, this internal warfare over strategy and direction. Meanwhile, competitors were eating their lunch and market share was plummeting. The focus was entirely inward.
So how did Gerstner fix it?
Radical simplification and a focus on principles over procedure. He slashed bureaucracy, flattened hierarchy, and made it crystal clear that the priority was winning in the marketplace, not winning internal arguments. He essentially had to mandate execution and break the habit of pushback, reminding everyone that high-performance cultures are led by clear principles applied with practical judgment, not by endless procedural debates.
He had to reestablish that link between decision and action and make it stick. That need for clarity, for everyone understanding the why. It's central to the concept of extreme ownership from the military context too, right?
Absolutely central. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin emphasized that senior leaders have a fundamental responsibility, not just to give orders, but to ensure their junior leaders and frontline troops understand the strategic context, the why behind the mission.
Why is that why so important? Isn't follow orders enough?
It's rarely enough, especially when conditions change rapidly, which they always do. Frontline people often lack the bigger picture. They see their piece of the puzzle, but not how it fits into the overall strategy. If they don't understand the why, the commander's intent, the overall goal, they can't adapt effectively when the plan inevitably hits friction.
They can't improvise or make smart decisions on the fly if they don't know the ultimate objective.
Precisely. If the goals aren't clearly communicated and aligned up and down the chain, if the troops don't understand why taking that hill is important for the bigger battle, then execution becomes brittle. People might follow the letter of the order but miss the spirit, or worse, they might disengage because they don't believe in the mission. Explaining the why is how leaders empower decentralized command and unlock that resourcefulness and initiative Covey talked about. Okay, this brings us to our final pillar, agility. Especially in fields like tech or creative industries, things change so fast. Planning seems almost futile sometimes.
Right, and this is where Pixar's philosophy becomes really illuminating again. They operate in a space where originality is paramount, but the path to originality is inherently messy and unpredictable.
So how do they approach it? Not with massive detailed plans, apparently.
Quite the opposite. They champion iterative trial and error. They see experiments trying out a scene, testing a character dynamic, not as steps in rigid plan, but as fact-finding missions.
Fact-finding missions, what does that mean? It means the goal of the experiment isn't necessarily for it to succeed in the conventional sense. The goal is to learn. In this view, any outcome is a good outcome, because even if your hypothesis is proven wrong, you've gained valuable information. You know it doesn't work, which is critical knowledge.
Better to find out quickly and cheaply that an idea is flawed rather than investing heavily based on a faulty assumption.
Exactly, which is why they explicitly caution against over-planning, particularly for original work. Catmull notes that planning derivative work, something based on a previous success, is relatively easy. But if you're trying something genuinely new, relying on slow, deliberative planning is often just a way to delay facing reality. You create these intricate, beautiful plans
that are probably wrong from day one.
Right. And the danger isn't just inefficiency. It's psychological. People who invest heavily in creating the perfect plan become deeply attached to it. When reality inevitably deviates from the plan, which it always does in creative endeavors, they feel crushed, like they have failed personally.
So if planning isn't the answer and risk is inherent, what's management's role? This is a key insight from Pixar. Management's job is not primarily to prevent risk. Trying to eliminate all risk actually kills creativity and innovation. Instead, management's core job is to build the ability to recover when risks inevitably lead to failures or setbacks. Build the ability to recover. How do you do that?
By building systems and a culture that make failure less costly. Things like redundancy, psychological safety so people aren't afraid to flag problems, rapid prototyping so you can test ideas quickly and cheaply, clear feedback loops like the brain trust. It's about making failure survivable, fast, and most importantly, informative.
This tolerance for problems, for things not going smoothly, seems incredibly deep-seated there. I remember reading about Toy Story 3.
Ah, yes. The paradox of the perfect production.
Right. Apparently, as the film neared completion, it was getting praise internally for having had no major crisis during its development. Smooth sailing.
You'd think the crew would be thrilled, right? High fives all around.
But they were actually offended by that assessment.
It sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? Success breeding offense. But their interpretation was fascinating.
What was it?
They felt that a lack of major crisis meant they hadn't pushed hard enough. They hadn't ventured far enough into unknown territory. They hadn't stretched themselves creatively or technically. If everything went smoothly, it probably meant they were playing it too safe, relying on formulas, not truly innovating.
So struggle equals growth. Problems equal progress.
In their view, yes. Andrew Stanton, the director, is quoted saying something like, "We get worried if a film is not a problem child right away. It makes us nervous." They actively welcome that feeling of confronting a problem they've never encountered before, because that's the sign they're actually creating something new.
That's a profound reframing of failure and difficulty. Comfort is the enemy of originality.
Pretty much. And if you embrace problems as opportunities for learning and innovation, it changes how you think about solving them. It shouldn't just be the leaders tackling the big, hairy issues.
Right, which connects to the ideas in the book Multipliers.
Exactly. Liz Wiseman's concept of multipliers versus diminishers is key here. Diminishers tend to hoard intelligence and control, trying to be the smartest person in the room, the one who solves all the big problems.
And multipliers.
Multipliers focus on amplifying the intelligence and capability of everyone around them. They leverage the team's collective brain power, getting effectively double the contribution because they empower others.
So instead of problem solving being bottlenecked at the top,
you distribute it. You empower people at all levels, those closest to the problem who often have the best contextual knowledge, to actually own the problem and the solution.
So the person on the production line or the junior engineer sees an issue and feels empowered to flag it, maybe even propose a fix, without needing 5 levels of approval.
That's the ideal. When you create a culture where the threat of failure has been defanged, as Catmull puts it, where trying something sensible that doesn't work out isn't a career-ending move, then you unleash people's natural desire to contribute and solve problems.
It's about trusting people, giving them agency, and building that robust, distributed capacity for recovery and adaptation.
Precisely. Management's role shifts from controlling everything to creating the conditions where smart people throughout the organization can use their resourcefulness and initiative to overcome challenges, big and small. That's how you build true organizational agility and resilience. #outro.
Wow. Okay, pulling all these threads together, it's quite a tapestry. We've covered a huge amount of ground.
We really have. From Cicero's ancient call for virtue and the Gita's wisdom on detachment.
Through Machiavelli's pragmatic lessons in wielding power.
Right up to the very modern, very candid cultures of places like Pixar and the principles driving Bridgewater or IBM's turnaround.
And what emerges, I think, is this surprisingly consistent framework for effective action, applicable whether you're leading an army, a company, or just, your own life.
I agree. It seems to boil down to getting 3 layers aligned. First, that deep internal foundation. Your character, your principles, your why. Knowing what you stand for and maintaining that inner equanimity, that semia.
Okay, the inner game.
Second, the external culture. Building an environment where truth prevails, where candor is practiced, where ideas are judged on merit and believability, so you're aligned with reality, the what.
Inner character, outer truth.
And third, the strategic approach. Acting from a position of security, valuing agility, building the capacity to recover from setbacks, and ensuring everyone understands the mission, the how. It's about minimizing catastrophic failure while maximizing adaptation.
It really emphasizes that true strength isn't about avoiding problems or trying to control every single outcome, which is impossible anyway.
Right. It's about building systems, personal, organizational, maybe even political, that are robust enough to handle reality, that allow truth and principle to guide necessary change, and that recognize the constant need to test our assumptions and learn from mistakes.
Which ultimately brings the responsibility right back to each of us, doesn't it? Back to the listener.
It has to. If we take Covey's point seriously, that effectiveness starts with recognizing our responsibility, our power to choose our response and take action, then it's on us to apply these ideas.
It comes back to that resourcefulness and initiative, the R&I.
Exactly. It's not enough to just understand these principles. We have to proactively use our R&I to put them into practice. So here's something to maybe chew on this week, a final thought for you listening. Reflecting on everything we've discussed, the inner app, the need for candor, the strategies for action and recovery. Where is the one area, maybe in your work, maybe in your personal life, where you suspect you might be clinging to a faulty map? Or perhaps, where have you been making that fool's choice? Avoiding a necessary difficult conversation out of a desire for comfort, sacrificing truth for artificial harmony. Think about that one specific area, and then ask yourself, how can you apply your own resourcefulness and initiative, your R&I starting this week, to address that reality? To trigger that internal revisal or initiate that crucial conversation or take that first step towards building resilience. Don't just think about it. Go figure it out.